Just the other day, I had a conversation with my wife of 11 years. Unfortunately, it ended with her in tears, reminding me of a similar moment 3 years ago when I almost lost my job. Back then, Emily, who also goes by Emily, was so upset at the idea of me missing our anniversary that she insisted I come home. But now, here we are, and it's her who won't be there for our anniversary this time. I didn't argue or try to change her mind. Despite all of this, the past 12 years have still been the best of my life. When I first met Emily, she was 24 and just getting started in sales. She'd come to our architectural firm trying to sell us on advertising in some high-end magazines. But we couldn't afford it back then. In that crowded room, I couldn't take my eyes off her. The beautiful woman with black hair. After discussing things with my partner, I got the courage to get her attention long enough to ask her out. She later admitted, after our first date, that she knew we couldn't pay for her services. But even then, I was already falling hard for her. Our relationship grew over the next 6 months, and eventually, she moved in with me for another 6 while transitioning from her nomadic lifestyle to a stable office job. For months later, we got married. I still feel like the luckiest man alive for convincing her to marry me. Feeling a bit of urgency, I picked up the phone and dialed my boss. I've been with the company since the start, back when it was just Mike and a few of us designers working to reduce production times in various fields. "Mike, pick up," I muttered into the phone. Finally, he answered. "Tom, I'm busy right now," he said, sounding stressed. Keeping it short, I told him, "I'm leaving today and won't be back until Monday." "Leaving? Where to?" he asked. "I'm heading out to celebrate my anniversary with Emily. I'll be back Monday." "Well, have a good trip, and remember to knock before coming back in," he joked. I chuckled. "You always manage to make me laugh," I said. "Yeah, I hear that a lot," he replied, "but not from people who know me well." "Sorry," I apologized. "Ever since Emily's department got that new guy, things have been tense at home. I'm hoping a few days at the hotel will help." "It can't hurt," he said. "Just do me a favor. When you're seeking adventure, think of me." "Deal," I laughed. "See you Monday." Before hanging up, I asked his secretary, Linda, for a favor. She was good at handling things, and I needed her to book me a plane ticket. After wrapping up with her, I headed home to pack. I was just finishing up when the phone rang again. "You've got 45 minutes to clear security. The ticket's waiting for you at the counter," Linda said. She'd also secured me a return flight for Sunday afternoon at 1:30 p.m. Unfortunately, Emily's hotel was booked, so she reserved a room 2 blocks away. "Safe trip, see you Monday," she added before hanging up. I grabbed my shaving kit, packed up quickly, and double-checked the room, turning off the coffee maker, which was unusual for me, then rushed out the door. After years of traveling, I've learned a few shortcuts to save time, and today they paid off. I made it to the airport with plenty of time. Once through security and on board, I settled into my seat, put on some music, and tried to relax. I'm not a fan of flying, but music usually helps calm me down. About 3 hours into the flight, I was gently shaken awake by a tap on my shoulder. I must have fallen asleep, which wasn't surprising given how little I've been sleeping lately. Between work stress and the distance growing between Emily and me, my nights have been rough. For the past few months, she's been keeping her distance from me. It all started when she mentioned a promotion in her department. A guy from another branch, Mark Cooper, had been promoted above her, and she was livid. She was determined to show them they'd made a mistake, and for 2 weeks, she came home exhausted, venting about how she was going to outshine him. But then something changed, and suddenly they were working together instead of against each other. That's when I started wondering if there was something more going on. She always assured me there wasn't, but the doubt still nagged at me. When the plane landed, I grabbed my bag, thinking about how I could surprise Emily with a dinner invitation. After a short taxi ride to my hotel, I struck up a conversation with the driver, who mentioned a cozy restaurant right between our 2 hotels. It sounded perfect, exactly what I had in mind. After checking in, I quickly showered and headed out, hoping to catch Emily before she went to dinner. The lobby clock read 5:30 as I passed through. The streets were crowded, but I walked over, following the directions the receptionist had given me. It was a pleasant walk, and I made sure to note the location of that restaurant the cab driver had recommended, just steps from her hotel. At 5:50, I entered her hotel lobby and waited in line at the front desk. A receptionist smiled and motioned for me to come forward. "Hello?" I greeted the receptionist with a warm smile. "My name is Tom Dawson. I was wondering if my wife, Emily Dawson, is in her room. I'd really like to speak with her." "Emily Dawson?" she asked, confirming the name and checking her notes. "Yes, she's staying here. Let me call her room and see if she's in." After a brief wait, she turned to me with an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's no answer. Would you like to leave a message?" "No, not right now," I replied, feeling a bit disappointed. I was hoping to surprise her. "We have an anniversary tomorrow. I'd appreciate it if you didn't mention our conversation." "Of course, sir," she assured me. "I hope you have a wonderful day tomorrow." "Thanks," I said, trying to sound hopeful. "I'm thinking of going to a restaurant. Maybe I'll get lucky and find her there. Good night." I moved away from the desk and headed toward the far end of the lobby. It was crowded with people working, eating, and socializing, and I realized the odds of finding her in this chaos were slim. I spotted a restroom along one side, closer to the back wall. After taking a quick look around, I scanned the room left and right, hoping for any sign of her. But no luck. She wasn't there. After finishing up in the restroom, I positioned myself near the corridor entrance and looked around again. It seemed pointless. Finding her in this crowded space felt impossible. Then, just as I was about to give up, I heard a faint sound of laughter. It sounded like hers. I followed the wall with my eyes, but tall booths blocked my view, revealing only snippets of people's faces. Not wanting to approach until I was sure, I slowly made my way along the row of tables, one at a time. And then I saw her, sitting in a booth, deep in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. She looked stunning, wearing the same elegant dress she always wore for our nights out Thompsing. Their body language was relaxed and comfortable, much more than what you'd expect between colleagues. My heart raced as he leaned in closer to her, and I found myself gripping the doorframe for support. A moment later, they kissed. Just a soft, tender kiss, but it was enough to shake me to my core. I backed away from the doorway, filled with mixed emotions, and moved toward the center of the room, sinking into one of the padded chairs. Time felt like it slowed down as I sat there, my eyes glued to their table. Then, I heard her laughter again. When I looked up, she was walking beside him, holding his arm with both hands. Their closeness was undeniable, and it stirred something inside me. They walked past me, just 15 feet away, talking quietly, but all I could focus on was the way she looked at him. It had been so long since I'd seen that kind of look on her face, an expression of pure affection. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I didn't know what to do. I stood up and headed toward the exit, my mind racing, my eyes still on them. She clung to his arm as they strolled down the street, turning a corner and disappearing into the same restaurant I had noticed earlier. Shaken from my thoughts, I followed them to the door, but I paused, realizing I needed to calm down. I didn't want to confront them recklessly, so I took a few deep breaths. I needed to see more to understand what was really going on. After collecting myself, I opened the door and stepped inside, sticking close to the wall near the entrance. The room was dimly lit, and I waited a moment for my eyes to adjust before searching for them. Finally, I spotted them at a small table in the back, just the two of them. I slowly made my way over, keeping to the shadows, and found a small table nearby. A waitress appeared almost instantly behind me. "What can I get for you?" she asked. "Double scotch on the rocks," I replied quietly, my attention still focused on them. I overheard part of their conversation. "Our meeting tomorrow isn't until 10, the man said softly to Emily. "So we can celebrate late into the night." "I'm glad you didn't let him talk you into going home," he added. "We couldn't miss our 2-month anniversary for anything." "I can't believe it's been 2 months already," Emily responded. It could have been longer, he said, grinning. If only you'd accepted my offer during my first week at work. She laughed, shaking her head. I had to play innocent, considering I'm supposedly married, she joked, recalling how he had asked her out in front of Beth despite knowing she was married. Beth told me you liked me, he said. We should thank her. She helped bring us together. Emily nodded in agreement, and just then the waitress returned with their drinks. They raised their glasses in a toast. To 2 amazing months and many more to come, he said. I'll do whatever it takes, he promised as their glasses clinked together. There will be plenty more, Emily said cheerfully. The waitress placed my drink in front of me and asked, Here you go, dear. Is there anything else you need? I handed her a $10 bill and said, Thank you, ma'am, before turning my attention back to the nearby table. They glanced up at me, but as strangers, my presence didn't seem to matter. Emily, noticing his gaze shift, turned and looked directly at me. You know, a guy should always carry a camera for moments like this, I remarked. Her expression was priceless, like something you'd see on a poster. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Wow, 2 months, huh? That's a special anniversary. I remember mine, but after 11 years, the novelty wears off. I continued watching them both, feeling the words slip out. Let's celebrate 2 months. That's a symbol of passion and prosperity, right? A lovely couple like you deserves a gift. With that, I tossed the ring in Emily's direction. And here's a surprise. Mark reacted with a loud outburst, clearly realizing that sticking around would only lead to trouble. Emily tried to calm him down, but I just looked at her and said, Tell him he's lucky he wasn't in my house. I added, Please let me know where I can send your belongings. If you're smart, you'll stay away from my house. And some ice on his nose might help with the discomfort. With that, I turned around and walked out. Leaving the club, I made my way quickly back to the hotel. I doubted Emily even knew where I lived now, and after what I'd just done to her friend, I didn't expect her to follow me. I needed to put some distance between us fast, so I rushed into the lobby and headed straight for the front desk. Excuse me, do you have contact numbers for airlines? I need to book a flight urgently, I asked. Of course, sir, the employee replied. Do you have a preferred airline? And when would you like to depart? I provided the details, and she promised to get back to me with the flight information in my room. Back in the room, I paced back and forth, still trying to wrap my head around everything that had just happened. How did it come to this? A thought crossed my mind. Maybe Emily had missed her true calling in life. Her performance these past months had been impressive, to say the least. As my frustration grew, I realized I couldn't stay in that room any longer. Grabbing my bag, I quickly made my way downstairs to the lobby. The receptionist, just finishing up a call, waved me over. Sir, if you leave now, you should make the last flight out today. Registration closes in 30 minutes. If you miss it, the next flight isn't for another 3 hours, she informed me. Thanks, I said, hoping for a reliable taxi nearby. I signed the receipt handed to me by another woman, who smiled and said, I'm sorry your stay was cut short. We hope to see you next time. As I headed for the exit, a wave of memories hit me all at once. I rushed outside and quickly flagged down a taxi. $50 says you can get me to the airport in under 30 minutes. I told the driver as I climbed in. You got it, boss, he replied confidently, snapping me back to reality. He was experienced and got me to the airport in just 20 minutes. I paid the fare, threw in an extra $1.50 tip, thanked him and hurried inside. Looking back, I realized there was no need to rush. I still had a few minutes to spare after passing through security. As I waited for the boarding announcement, I found myself thinking about Emily's family. Her mother never really liked me, and her sister Deborah, well, Deborah controlled her husband John like he was nothing. I could never stand the way she treated him, and she knew it. One time, she even accused me of cheating on Emily, saying she'd seen me glancing at other women. Throughout the flight, doubts kept gnawing at me. I pulled out the photo I always carried of Emily and me. Studying it, something felt different. The person next to Emily suddenly seemed like a stranger. I looked around to make sure no one was watching, then returned my gaze to the photo. It was me standing beside Emily, but the way she looked at him, at Mark, made me question everything. Although people say men aren't known for their memory, I've always prided myself on mine. Emily often tested it, asking, "Do you remember this? Or do you remember that?" And I did. I remembered it all. Every conversation, every plan, every secret shared in the dark. Now, sitting there on the plane, I couldn't help but wonder if I had missed this all unfolding in front of me for the past 2 months. What else had I overlooked? The man Mark had shown interest in her from the start. Emily claimed she rejected his advances, saying it was because she was married. But now the thought of them together gnawed at me. I came up with a plan. First, I'd go home and pack up all her things. Then, I'd take them to her mother's house. Of course, her mother would find a way to blame me, but I didn't care. I just wanted the truth. When we landed at the airport, it felt like my family life had unraveled completely. I headed straight to my car and joined the exit queue. The drive home was a blur, and I barely remembered it. Somehow I made it, but I couldn't tell you how long it took. It didn't matter anyway. Stepping into the dimly lit house, everything felt off. I knew I had to get used to this new reality. Dropping my bag, I headed toward the kitchen, flipping on the answering machine along the way. A familiar, pleading voice played through the speaker. "Tom, please don't do anything rash. I'm heading home to talk. Please wait for me," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. I could hear the pain in her words, and while part of me believed that a cheater should face the consequences, I didn't want to listen to it, especially not in that voice. Frustrated, I impulsively slammed my fist down. It might have been a rash move, but I needed to protect myself from making any foolish decisions. I knew right then that sleep would be impossible that night. I headed to the garage and started gathering the suitcases she had accumulated over the years. I chose a large black one along with a bag for her clothes, setting them aside, and brought the rest into the bedroom. Sorting through her closet, I carefully picked a few items and stuffed them into the bags, repeating the process several times. When I turned to the dresser, I realized it had been ages since I'd seen her underwear in there. For a brief moment, the odd thought of grabbing some hot dogs popped into my head. I was supposed to take her stuff to her mother's house, but I didn't want to deal with her parents. Instead, I opted for some time alone with lox and marshmallows. Dealing with her family wasn't something I was up for, so I made a quick decision and went to the hardware store to buy new locks. When I got home, I realized I couldn't just leave all her stuff piled up in the front room. Thinking it through, I loaded everything into the car and drove to her mom's house. I drove slowly, not in any rush, and once I arrived, I unloaded everything near the garage. I didn't want to make John do any extra work, especially since neither his wife nor his daughter would help him out. As I dropped the third box, my mother-in-law appeared. "Hi, Tom. What's all this? What's going on?" she asked. "Well," I explained, "when Emily gets back, she might need her things. I thought she'd come pick them up herself, but I couldn't wait any longer. They were cluttering up my place." She looked at me, confused and pale. "What do you mean, when Emily arrives? I thought she wasn't even in town yet. Why are her things here?" "Carol," I sighed, "I don't know exactly what her plan is, but I assume she'll stay with you for a while. Maybe she's moving in with that guy she's been spending time with, but I can't say for sure. That's why I brought her stuff." Her face grew even paler. "What are you saying? How can you accuse my daughter of something like this? She's been staying there for work. She'd never cheat on you." Her voice shook as she teetered on the edge of hysteria. "I saw them together last night," I said calmly. "They looked pretty happy. They were celebrating their 2-month anniversary at some lively club near their hotel. I'd been asking her to come home for our anniversary, but she kept saying she couldn't, so I flew out to surprise her. When I got there, I found them having a very intimate dinner. The whole atmosphere was romantic, and I didn't want to interrupt. Besides, when I saw them kiss across the table, I realized I needed to gather my thoughts. When they passed me in the hotel lobby, I thought about saying something, but she whispered something into his ear, and I just couldn't bring myself to disrupt them. I needed fresh air, so I stepped outside. Then I followed them as they left and headed to a nightclub. I sat at a table nearby, listening to her say she didn't want to leave him on their 2-month anniversary. He corrected her, saying it was actually their 3rd month together. I paused for a moment and added, "It hit me then. If I wanted to make things right, I had to get involved. But instead, I tried to stay invisible. Eventually, I had my first drink in 10 years. Emily always worried about my drinking, said it could ruin our marriage. So I took off my wedding ring and tossed it their way. Honestly, I think he got the better end of the deal." Carol was shocked. "You're lying?" she whispered, struggling to hold back her emotions. "How could you say such horrible things about your wife? You've been together for 11 years. She's told me everything. She's been deeply troubled by all of this." "I'll never call her my wife again," I shot back. "You might feel obligated to stand by her because she's your daughter, but I don't have to. I saw it all with my own eyes. For the past 2 months, I've been living alone while she's been with him. Ever since he joined her company, things changed. It's hard to believe how she turned out, considering the upbringing you gave her. But she looked me in the eye for 3 months straight and lied every single day, without a shred of guilt. If you think I'm letting her back into my house, you're more foolish than she is." Carol stood there, speechless. "Look," I continued, "you can believe what you want, but I'm done. She's clearly chosen him, and he can have her. She won't have to hide their relationship anymore. When she's done playing her games, I'll point her in this direction. Then you'll see for yourself who's been lying." I placed the last of her belongings on the ground and instructed Carol, "When she comes by, make sure she gets the message exactly as I've said it." With those words, I got into my car and drove off. Restless and wound up, I wandered around the house for hours before retreating to a small corner of the garage. I needed to keep myself busy, so I set up an improvised workspace. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, breaking my thoughts. Curiosity got the best of me, so I went to the door and opened it cautiously. Without a word, I instinctively took a step back. Emily stepped into the room, and it hit me. I was still in the garage. "You must have been in the garage," she remarked, closing the door behind her. "I knocked, but you didn't hear me." "I was just tidying up," I replied, glancing around at the cluttered space. Emily sighed. "Well, Mom already called me. Seems like you've already made up your mind about what to do with me." Her face was a mix of sadness and disappointment as she looked at me. "What did you expect, Emily? That I wouldn't mind you having an affair?" I asked her. She paused, then said quietly, "I guess I wasn't thinking clearly. Not rationally anyway." I shook my head, overwhelmed with disappointment. "It's a shame because all I did was think. You see, there was no one around to distract me from my thoughts. I missed having someone to go to dinner with, to visit a club with, to share quiet moments in the dark, whispering and kissing. But instead, I was left with a woman who could lie to my face without hesitation, live in my house, share my life, and still be with someone else. Not exactly a pleasant picture, is it? Are you really ready to throw away 11 years of our life together?" she asked. "Are you really asking me that, Emily? Did you even stop to think about it yourself? Would it have bothered you if I had a real relationship with someone else instead of just playing games? You didn't seem to care much when you made your decision," I said, moving toward a chair. Emily replied softly, "I think I understand your perspective." "Do you really, Emily? Because I doubt that you do. For you, this was just an act of infidelity. You probably found a way to justify it, maybe even put the blame on me. Is that it, Emily? Did something I do push you into the arms of another man?" She lowered her head. "No, I don't blame you. It just happened. Just happened," I repeated, incredulous. "Emily, having an affair for 2 months isn't something that just happens. Takes effort, takes secrecy, and to keep it going for months, well, that takes even more effort. You've played your role well, I'll give you that. It's amazing how you managed to find the time to juggle it all. Lying to me every day, laughing about it behind my back. And that tearful phone call last night? That was a real performance. Maybe you should consider a new career. You could outshine some of the last Oscar winners." I let out a brief, bitter laugh, one I hadn't meant to, but it escaped anyway. It's obvious you don't love me, Emily. Not if that's how you treat someone you supposedly love. How can you say that after 11 years? She protested, her voice rising in indignation. Here's a question for you, Emily, I said, leaning in. Since you love to ask so many of them yourself. Let's say I had a brief fling with someone else, just a one-time thing. How do you think you'd react? She hesitated before replying in a quiet voice. Honestly, I think I would have asked you to leave. I would have started divorce proceedings. Thank you for your honesty, I said. I figured you'd say something like that. I even imagined you throwing something at me. But who knows, right? I added with a wry smile. She gave a faint smile in return. Maybe. Now imagine, I continued, that for almost 3 months, every day we spent together meant nothing to me. It was all just an act, a facade to make you think our relationship was fine. Meanwhile, I was spending entire days with another woman, leaving you behind. Could you honestly believe that I loved you after nearly 13 years of being together? I stared at her. Show me some confidence, Emily, because from where I'm standing, it seems like you don't care about any of this. The time we spent together was important to me, she said quietly. It wasn't just small talk or casual moments. I enjoyed being with you. Do you remember the last time we were close, Emily? When was the last time you initiated a kiss or acted like my wife? I asked. After what I've seen and heard, it's hard to believe you're standing here telling me you love me. I'm not naive, Emily. I overheard you talking about him with Beth the moment he joined your office. And then you two decided to give her a gift for bringing you together. Seems like you've already found your next bridesmaid. All that's left is to find his best man, and your wedding banquet will be complete. I leaned back in my chair. So, are you just like me after all? Should I expect a server to show up at my doorstep? She asked, her voice heavy with sarcasm. What do you want from me, Emily? I replied. First, I need to know where you're going to live. No process server will show up with divorce papers at your door. I'm reserving that for myself. The case is closed. Escape from Emily and move forward. And if you happen to see me with someone else, don't even think about interfering. What are you trying to prove with all this? She asked, sounding frustrated. I'm not trying to prove anything to you, Emily, I answered coldly. What I did for myself, not for you. Why would I fight for a man like you? Someone who disrespected me so much that you thought I'd excuse your behavior, that I'd tolerate it. When I gave you my ring, that was the moment I knew you were done. I won't waste any more energy on something that no longer matters to either of us. I can't forget, and I won't forgive. Based on everything you've done, it's clear I'm not a priority for you, and I never was. So, it's time for me to leave you, Emily, and move on. I don't know how you thought this would all end, but you've ruined everything. Now, it's your turn to sleep at his place, I said, locking eyes with her. You're kicking me out and keeping everything for yourself? Honestly, it seems unfair after 11 years, she replied, sounding frustrated. It always comes down to a deal, doesn't it? Well, here's the deal. If you want a house, you'll have to pay for it. As for me, I'm keeping this one. I've fallen in love with it. With the extra space, I can finally turn it into something I really want, I responded. I thought you and Bast had already found a place, I added. His name is Mark, she corrected me. I couldn't care less. Really? Do you think he has nowhere to live? I asked. Of course he does, she answered. Well, then that's settled, I remarked. I was waiting for your answer, but something just hit me. So, do you not think his wife will be okay with this arrangement? Her face changed. Wait, did you find out everything about him? How did you know he was married? She asked seriously. This isn't a joke, Emily. You really think I'm that naive? Why else would you be here, standing in front of me? So, what's the deal? He doesn't want to leave his wife for you? Surely, you haven't seriously thought about coming back to me, have you? She didn't respond, so I continued. I've thought about this for a while. Maybe, just maybe, I could forgive you considering we've been together for 11 years. But the more I reflect on it, the clearer it becomes we're done. You made that choice. Those 2 months with him, go ahead and cherish them, because I'm sure you'll get even more time together. But don't try to play the history card with me anymore. When I gave you that ring, it marked the end of everything. I watched her as I spoke, and then I finished. I'll make up for those 11 years by filing the divorce papers. As for the house, the offer remains. If you don't want to leave right away, you can come back and take whatever you want. But as for me, I'm moving on. I can't trust you, and I never will again. Do you want the house for yourself? I asked her directly. No, I don't want to keep the house, she said, pulling her hand from her pocket. Give me a few days to find a new place, and I'll take some of the furniture. She handed me the ring. What should I do with this? She asked. Do whatever you want. I've got an idea, though. Why not wear it as a toe ring? It'd fit perfectly, considering how you treated him, I said with a smirk. I might even find some use for it myself. Okay, you know what? Maybe I'll pawn it. Could use some extra cash, she snapped. Well, don't expect much. You won't get more than $1.30 for it. Pawn shops buy these things by weight, and gold doesn't go far, I said dismissively. But it's yours. Do as you please with it. She then asked, Did you get all my stuff out of the closet? Yeah, I got everything. I was a little annoyed with the furniture, but I packed it all, I replied. I'll call you in a few days. And just so you know, I didn't pack it all too neatly. Hope your clothes aren't too wrinkled after your trip, I added, a touch sarcastic. Can I take a look? She asked. Of course, don't be shy. You know where everything is, I said, noticing the slight frown on her face as she walked upstairs. I listened to her moving around the bedroom, then heard her rummaging in the closet and the bathroom. A few minutes later, she came back downstairs, stuffing cosmetics into a floral zip-up bag. You were thorough. You only missed a couple things, she said with a forced smile. I might have to call you when it's time to move. Sure. I'll be happy to help as long as it's not too close to me, I replied, grinning as I got up to open the door for her. She suggested, Maybe we could go for a walk? I paused for a moment, considering her request. Then an idea struck me. Wouldn't it be better if you ran instead? I asked with a straight face. Kiss me goodbye, she said, turning to leave. I wouldn't dare kiss someone who's been where you've been, I retorted, closing the door behind her. And just like that, it marked the end of our communication. 3 months later, my lawyer filed the divorce papers. On Monday, I had 2 stops to make. First to the lawyer's office to pick up the documents, then to my mother-in-law's house to get Emily's signature. I needed to make sure there were no misunderstandings, no false hopes of reconciliation. When I parked outside her mother's house, I paused, looking at the familiar place. This was it, the final step to close this chapter and finally move on. I got out of the car and walked to the front door, ringing the bell. To my surprise, my mother-in-law answered. Well, Tom, what brings you here? What's going on? She asked. I thought you'd forgotten about us by now, I replied. Not yet. Is Emily here? I asked. Yes, she's inside. Come on in, she said, leading me in. A few moments later, Emily entered the room. Emily, I'm here for your signature. Once you sign these, I'll file them tomorrow, and then we'll be officially done. I just want this over with, I explained. Emily sighed. I guess I was never good enough for you, was I? She said bitterly. Do you seriously think I'll just stand by and watch what you've done these last few months? She left the room briefly but came back with a pen in her hand. As she hastily signed her name on the pages, I watched her carefully, noticing every movement she made. When she finished signing, she slammed the pen down on the table and quickly gathered everything into a manila envelope, ready to be archived. You're free now, she said. Thank you for signing these. Take care of yourself, and I hope you find happiness, I replied. Then, shifting her focus from me to herself, she called, Mom, you can come in now. Congratulations to you as well, I added, before walking out the door. As I drove away, a wave of mixed emotions hit me. I understood that this was truly the end of our relationship, and I couldn't shake the feeling that life was about to take a completely different turn. A month later, The divorce was finalized, marking the official beginning of my new life. Not long after, I received some unexpected news from Emily's father. He told me that after our divorce, Emily had asked Mark to leave his wife and marry her. But Mark had made it clear that he couldn't do that. He admitted that he had no real romantic feelings for her. That revelation hit Emily hard. She had to accept that she would be moving forward without me, and without Mark, forced to reckon with the lessons of our past relationship. Emily now lives with her parents and is searching for a new job after being disgracefully fired from her previous position. Just like Mark, thanks to me. According to her father, Emily isn't doing well. She's had a few encounters with other men, but they've either been married men only looking for intimacy or men with questionable intentions. Her involvement in these relationships led to her contracting a psychiatric illness, and she's now in therapy.